Hi, and welcome to this episode of Encountering Jesus. My name is Cindy Johnston, and I'm your host. This is the Heaven's Door audiobook series. Here's the book.
Heaven's Door by Cindy Johnston. Copyright 2020. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced without permission. Chapter 15. The Queen's Attitude. In these next two stories, Jesus continues to work on my heart. In the first story, you will see how he and I enjoy a precious friendship while hanging out together in a simple setting. In the second, the opposite is true. In this story, Jesus takes me to meet a queen in a royal palace. To begin with, I had moved from the stone castle to a small quaint beach house. As I've explained before, when I say moved, I mean that I was in the beach house instead of my identity room when I arrived in my heavenly place. Also, this was the new place I couldn't explain in the last chapter, but by this time I was very familiar with it. So, now I can tell you all about it in detail. One day after spending time with Jesus on the beach, I got a scenic view of my dear little house as we were returning from our walk. All in all, it was a small humble structure built on the side of a little hill. It rested atop several big round poles or pilings that kept the house dry during big storm surges when the powerful waves flooded the beach. Being this close to the ocean has been so meaningful and entertaining. Many times, Jesus and I spent long hours sitting on the deck, enjoying the ocean during sunshine, rain, and even the occasional thunderstorm. It is absolutely breathtaking. Oh, and one last thing about the pilings. The poles nearest the ocean were about 5 feet tall at the front of the beach house. The rest tapered down to about a foot in length by the time they reached the back of the building where the small hill met the foundation. Overall, the structure looked worn and weathered, but all of that was part of the little house's charm. As we came to the stairs, Jesus put his hand under my elbow for support and sweetly guided me along. He opened the door and ushered me inside. Jesus always took such good care of me, making me feel so special. The inside of the house was nearly all one room. The living room and kitchen were together, and the bedroom was in the back. Jesus headed straight over to the tiny kitchen and went behind the counter to get us a drink of water. The counter wasn't the expensive modern type with a huge marble-topped island. Rather, it was a long skinny bar with a plastic countertop. There were a few simple 3-legged stools partially tucked up under the little overhang. Truthfully, the tiny room couldn't have supported anything larger. The apartment-sized furniture and the older, low-cost decor reminded me of what you would find in a cheap trailer. He set my glass on the bar, so I pulled a stool out and sat down. Once I picked up my water, Jesus picked up his tall glass and took a long drink. Then, as he often does, he leaned his hip against the counter and crossed one foot over the other. At this point, we continued to chat. Nothing unusual happened that day, but all of these sweet, humble times with Jesus were so satisfying and helped me see him as a gentle, kind man who loved me. Yet, in this next story, things are much different as Jesus tries to confront my old religious mindsets about who he is and who I am in him. His royal palace and the queen. It all began one day as I entered into the Spirit. I found myself lying on the bed. This was always how I came into my heavenly place. I often thought of Snow White or Sleeping Beauty as I would wake up to find Jesus standing over me, eagerly waiting on me to come awake in the Spirit. He seemed excited as he told me he had something special for me that day. He helped me dress in a bright yellow summer dress. It had a collar, short sleeves, and a full tea-length skirt. Jesus put a wide white belt on me and dainty yellow pumps with kitten heels and cute white bows on top. The whole outfit matched perfectly. At the time, I thought it looked like something Grace Kelly would have worn. Then, as the final touch, he put a simple tiara on my head and whisked me away to the place he had planned. We arrived at the top of a grand circular staircase. I found the massive place so startling that I stood there, stunned in awe. Without a doubt, we were in a magnificent royal palace. Jesus guided me along past several doors, then up to the one he wanted. He opened the door for me and stepped back. I looked at him in surprise as I realized he wasn't going in with me. Before I could question this, something in the room caught my eye. I turned to see that in the middle of the huge entrance sat a queen looking very proper in her high-backed chair. Intrigued, I entered the room. Everything seemed so regal, but so cold. Uncomfortable, I glanced back at Jesus as I tried to figure out why I was there and what he wanted me to do. He tipped his head in the queen's direction, and I knew he meant for me to go up to her. I did so very politely, trying to give her my respect. When I got within a few feet of her chair, she placed a hand on each arm and stood with purpose. She began to speak, and I thought I detected an English accent, though later, I wondered if I imagined this. I was told you needed some instructions on how to be a queen. So here it is. Her eyes seemed to narrow as she glared at me. 1. You always dress for every occasion. 2. You never speak ill of the royal family. 3. You never keep the king waiting when he calls. She closed her mouth with a snap and then abruptly sat down. I knew I was dismissed. Shell-shocked, I went back to where Jesus was standing. He guided me out of the room and closed the door. Soon we were back at the beach house. As the whole episode with the queen began to catch up to me, I became very angry. I could not even imagine why Jesus had taken me to such a ridiculous meeting. Are we royalty? Before I had this vision about the queen, Jesus tried to talk to me about being a queen. Repeatedly he would try to show me who I am in him, but I could not receive it. I would get frustrated, as I did in this vision with the queen. That wasn't the case when I was with Jesus at the beach house. I was very comfortable there. I adored being with him. He was so humble that I would often forget he is both God and King. I only wanted to get to know him and focus on his heart during this time, which allowed me to commune with him in such a pure and delightful way. What bliss you experience when your heart is pure! For then your eyes will open to see more and more of God. Matthew 5 verse 8, TPT. I believe Jesus was pleased with my desire for his heart, but he wanted more for me than a tiny beach house with second-hand furniture. He wanted me to see the grandness of who he is and who I am in him. As I said, he has told me repeatedly that I am royalty. Scripture makes it clear that if we suffer with Jesus, we will be co-heirs with him and share his kingdom, Romans 8 verse 17. Jesus was doing everything he could to open my eyes, but nothing was getting through. He even invited me into his heart and his home to meet this dear queen to tell me what I would not hear from him. However, my false humility and wounded heart twisted it all and made it impossible for me to accept, Jeremiah 17 verses 9 to 10. Now to thoroughly discuss what Jesus has since revealed to me about these two stories, I need to tell you another. In this next chapter, I'd like to share with you a time that I could accept what Jesus was showing me about sitting on the throne. Chapter 16. Decorating the Throne. If you'll remember, in chapter 11, I began going to the throne room, where the Father would take me on his lap and do the heart exchange. As I said before, experiencing his heart in this way caused me to fall head over heels in love with his delightful sweetness. One day as I came into my heavenly place, I got dressed and asked the Father if I could come to visit him. He brought me to his throne room. To be clear, I don't think this is the high throne, but a less formal place for us to connect with the Father. As I had done many times before, I climbed the few steps to him and reached up like a child. He picked me up and put me on his lap. We did the heart exchange, and I melted into his heart. There is no way to describe the pleasure this brought me as my soul was laid bare before him. Somehow, this always reduces me to having the mind of a young child. On this day, Jesus came and sat on the throne to the Father's right. I had never noticed a chair on that side. But I thought it was so much fun that we were all together. I hugged the Father, and he told me that I could come and see him anytime I wanted. I was elated by this. "See, my daughter, I even have a special place for you to sit when you come." He turned me around and showed me another chair on the other side of his throne. Then he lifted me up and sat me in the chair, but I didn't like it. It was way too big, and my arms couldn't reach the armrests. Plus, the stone was cold, so I wasn't thrilled about sitting on it. The Father looked at me and smiled as he took me back on his lap. "Cindy, what would you do to make this chair more comfortable so that it feels like your own?" I thought for a minute, and then I knew. I told him that I felt it needed some big seat cushions on the bottom and the back. Then I asked, "If it really is mine, shouldn't my name be on it?" Soon angels brought some oversized cushions made from a royal-looking paisley print. I loved the fabric's pink, burgundy, and sage green colors. After that, the angels brought me a whiteboard and some markers to write my name. When I was done, the angels strung the board with some brown twine. Then the Father held me over the back of the chair so I could hang the sign. I can remember how cute it was with the board hanging lopsided on a nail, and my name roughly spelled out with the Y, turned around backward. Then the Father placed me on the chair. The ample cushions helped my arms reach the armrests, and with my name written on the sign, the chair now felt like it was mine. On a few other occasions, the three of us would make it a point to sit down together. Jesus was on the Father's right, and I was on the left. When we practiced, I learned to wait for the Father to sit first, then Jesus and I would sit at the same time. Clearly, they were doing everything possible to make me feel at home. And it worked. After this, I popped in and out of the throne room whenever I wanted. The Father always seemed overjoyed with our visits. He would take me on his lap and love on me. He would talk to me and help me understand many things about Jesus and heaven that I was confused about. Just being with him always brought me such peace. Through these divine encounters, I often had more questions than answers. One of them was why I had never heard anyone else talking about being a queen or sitting on the throne with Jesus. This often puzzled me and caused me great concern. But in Revelations 3:20-21, TPT, it says, "Behold, I'm standing at the door, knocking. If your heart is open to hear my voice and you open the door within, I will come into you and feast with you, and you will feast with me. And to the one who conquers I will give the privilege of sitting with me on my throne, just as I conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne." And remember, Romans 8:17 says we are co-heirs with Christ. Even with these scriptures, I still found the idea of being Jesus' queen way too much to comprehend. My pride made it impossible for me to consider that I could be worthy of this position. Still, Jesus refused to let me stay in this old religious mindset. I remember one time when he asked me, "Do you think I want only simple sheep or lowly servants for my eternal bride?" When I saw it through his eyes, I realized how boring and terrible that would be for him. Of course, he wants a whole bride who can be on his level and love him as he loves her. In 1 John 3:2, TPT, it says, "Beloved, we are God's children right now, however, it is not yet apparent what we will become. But we do know that when it is finally made visible, we will be just like him, for we will see him as he truly is." Confronting me with so many revelations about being his bride has forced me to deal with my false humility and pride. One person I studied about this was Peter, who also struggled with this type of false humility. In Matthew 16 verses 13-23, Peter declared Jesus was the Messiah, then shortly after rebuked Jesus for talking of his death. In John 13 verses 6 to 8, he refused to let Jesus wash his feet, thinking Jesus was too noble for such a lowly deed. Then in Galatians 2 verse 11, Paul rebuked Peter for falling back into the law. Also, a legend claims Peter insisted on being crucified upside down because he didn't feel worthy to die as Jesus did. Though I can't prove this last occurrence, it sounds just like him. I love Peter's passion and zeal for Jesus, but there is no doubt that Peter's pride and presumptuous ways often caused him to miss the truth. I can't tell you how often I have done similar things. But the truth is that these exaggerated noble mindsets and false humility undermine the work of the cross. Through his blood sacrifice, Jesus took our sin so we could take his righteousness. This makes us more than worthy to sit on the throne with him, and he is determined that we will learn about who we really are to him. You can see this in these 3 stories, how Jesus' heart skillfully guided me into the fullness of who I am in him. First, at the simple beach house, I was comfortable in a humble setting and saw Jesus more as my friend than Lord and King. Second, Jesus tried to show me who I was by taking me to his palace to meet the Queen. However, during that encounter, I completely missed his heart because I was blinded by my pride and wrong ideas about him. Third, his heart finally won over mine so I could sit on the throne with him. This only happened because I laid my heart bare and let God the Father infuse his heart into mine. It is easy to accept God's goodness when I see through his eyes of love and feel so secure in him. It is only through union with Jesus where our hearts are one that I'm able to sit with him on his throne and share in his glory. During these times, I'm unaware of the grandness of this place because I'm so focused on his heart and loving him. The goal of every Christian heart should be to love God completely. To adore him and give our heart to him as we eagerly enjoy him and bring him great pleasure. In turn, his desire is to do the same. He longs to take us and put us in a place of grandness where we are royalty and co-heirs with Christ. This is what brings God the greatest pleasure. To see his children enjoying all he has created for them. This is why it is so important that we let go of all the old ideas we have about God that are so wrong. Because all God wants to do is bless us with the riches and glory of heaven. These extravagant heavenly gifts were prepared for us from the foundations of the earth. But God cannot shower us with all his eternal splendor if we don't realize that Jesus' blood made us worthy.
Thank you for listening to my podcast. I have many more series that you can find on my website, heavensdoor41.com. Okay, have a great day. Bye now.